Yes, evening, Chris. It's a Friday night. We're in the centre of Manchester, a town known for having a pretty good nightlife. Where else better to be than at the launch of a Labour leadership candidate? Well, a couple of hundred people here seem to think that Rebecca Long-Bailey's launch is the hottest ticket in town. Emily Thornberry also launched her campaign today, both of them putting out their pitches. However, as is often the case with these sorts of races, what they're finding out today is that the story of the day, the story that overshadows things, isn't what was said today, but things that were said in the past that have suddenly come out. And that's precisely what Rebecca Long-Bailey has discovered today. The race for the Labour leadership is heating up. This weekend, the 5 candidates will go head-to-head in the first hustings of the campaign, a crucial moment. And there are already accusations of dirty tricks. Rebecca Long-Bailey's official campaign launch tonight was seen by some as a reset, an opportunity to try and project a more optimistic image. Instead, it's been overshadowed after comments she made about abortion during last December's general election campaign have resurfaced. Miss Long-Bailey, who is a Catholic, appeared to suggest the threshold for abortion on the grounds of disability should be changed when asked by representatives of Salford Catholic Cathedral. She said it is currently legal to terminate a pregnancy up to full term on the grounds of disability, while the upper limit is 24 weeks if there is no disability. I personally do not agree with this position and agree with the words of the Disability Rights Commission that the context in which parents choose whether to have a child should be one in which disability and non-disability are valued equally. Long-Bailey's spokesperson said it was a personal view, not a policy position, and that she, quote, supports a woman's right to choose.
Ms. Emily Thornberry.
But it's led to the other candidates speaking out on the issue. The Shadow Foreign Secretary, who's also launching her leadership campaign tonight in her hometown of Guildford, highlighted her support for abortion to be decriminalised in Northern Ireland as part of her pitch to be party leader.
Since coming into Parliament 15 years ago, I've again been on the front line in the fights against the climate emergency, universal credit, the anti-abortion laws in Northern Ireland. I've led the charge as Shadow Foreign Secretary against Donald Trump and the war in Yemen. And the 2 years that I shadowed Boris Johnson as Foreign Secretary, I showed up, and every time I showed him up to be the lying, reckless charlatan that he is. Yeah.
Jess Phillips, who has a long track record of campaigning on abortion, warned against policy based on religious views.
A person's personal political journey should be about the people in their country, and their religious views absolutely are welcomed. They are about their own personal decisions and should not enter into how we legislate for everybody in our country.
While Long-Bailey was having to clarify her position, her main leadership rival, Sir Keir Starmer, campaigning in Yorkshire, echoed the other candidates.
I think the law on abortion needs to be changed. It's been in place for many, many years, and I don't think women should be criminalised for seeking an abortion. So I want to see this reviewed and changed, and I want this seen as a health issue, not a criminal law issue.
A new poll of party members tonight suggests Rebecca Long-Bailey has fallen further behind Starmer in the leadership race. For her team, tonight's speech, where she'll attack the, quote, gentleman's club of politics, can't come soon enough. Well, according to a new poll out tonight, the person they're all waiting for, Rebecca Long-Bailey, is one of the front runners, but in second place. A YouGov poll for The Times has Keir Starmer polling at 63%, Rebecca Long-Bailey at 37%. It might be a bit early to write Rebecca Long-Bailey off just yet. This is a long campaign, 11 weeks. There are a dozen hustings, and the Labour membership tend to change their mind based on those hustings. I spoke to Rebecca Long-Bailey a little bit earlier on, asked her about her chances of success, but I started by asking her to clarify her position on abortion.
I unequivocally support a woman's right to choose and all of the policies in the last Labour manifesto, and it's been a pretty grubby 24 hours, if I'm honest.
The limit at the moment is 24 weeks, but for disabled children, for situations where the mother might be in danger,
it's up to full term. That's
and
right.
do you support that?
I do indeed, and the point that I was making to my constituents was that there were comments that were made by the Disability Rights Commission about concerns at the way the disabled community would feel and how that this was portrayed, and those views need to be taken into account. But certainly I was by no means suggesting that we need to restrict our abortion laws further.
So where do you think the attacks have been coming from? Does it feel like this has been weaponised against you?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't like to allude to any Machiavellian plans that have been going on, but it has been
does it
quite,
feel like that?
It's been quite suspicious, yeah. There have been certain news sources that have perpetrated this misrepresentation over the last 24 hours.
But do you think there's a possibility that it might be one of the other camps that...
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all.
You gave Jeremy Corbyn a 10 out of 10 for his performance. You've been a central figure of the Labour leadership over the last few years. The leadership that led the party to its worst result in decades. Why would you be a good person to now lead the party?
Well, I was asked about what I thought of Jeremy, and I always supported Jeremy because he was a decent, honourable, kind man, and he was different from any politician that we'd ever seen before. But we can't ignore the fact that we've had the most devastating defeat. We've got to understand that we didn't have a clear message that resonated with our voters. We've got to understand that Brexit was an issue that we just weren't trusted on. Due to our compromised position, and we've got to understand on issues such as anti-Semitism we weren't trusted to be taking the right action.
You mentioned the compromise position there. You've criticised that in the past. Tonight you're criticising the gentleman's club of politics. This all sounds like a not-so-veiled attack on the only gentleman who's in the race and the person who was behind your Brexit policy, Sir Keir Starmer.
Not at all, no. I'm talking about a democratic revolution. And the interesting thing to take from the Brexit debate was that we talked a lot and heard from our communities about how they were angry at how laws and rules were being made in Brussels. But unfortunately, they feel exactly the same way about Westminster. It's detached from many of our communities.
But you don't think Sir Keir Starmer is part of that gentleman's club?
Not at all, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that it's wrong to have a second tier within our legal system that's made up of unelected representatives who are there for life, essentially. We need to represent our communities and they need to be democratically elected.
Do you think the next leader needs to be a female?
I think the next female leader needs to be Northern, certainly, and needs to be female.
You think the next leader needs to be female?
Certainly do.
At the weekend, Jeremy Corbyn described the incident in Tehran where 176 people were killed due to an Iranian missile. He called it a crash. Was he wrong to use that phrase?
It's devastating. Violence and war in any part of the world, whoever perpetrates it, is wrong. And we have a role here in the UK.
Would you have called it a crash?
I think it was devastating.
But would you have called it a crash?
I would have called it a crash personally.
So Jeremy Corbyn was wrong to call it a crash?
I'm not saying that he was wrong, that's his personal opinion, but it's not certainly something that I would have said.
Lastly, some Labour Party MPs have described you as shy. The last leader that's described as shy was Theresa May. Do you think that's a worry?
I'm not shy. I've certainly been hard-working and stuck in my office developing many of our policies over the last 4 years, but shy is not something that I've ever been called. I don't think my husband would say I was shy.
Miss Mulvaney,
Thanks
you very
a lot.
much.
Well, Emily Thornberry joins us now from Guildford, where she's just been launching her campaign. Good evening. There are 4 women standing in this leadership election, and in tonight's poll, it is Sir Keir Starmer, the man who is way out in front. Do you think that's just to do with talent, or could there be some sexism as well?
I think that the campaign's only just started, mate. Don't start writing us off. You know, this is going to be a 3-month-long campaign, and what we need to do is see people at the hustings, and we'll be put through our mettle, and the members will in the end decide. These are very early stages. You know, there's a reason why it's a 3-month campaign. We've got 500,000 members to reach. Let's see what happens.
But should gender be an issue at all? Should anybody cast their vote thinking it would be better to have a woman than a man?
I think that people should vote for the best candidate. And the good news is, mate, is that the best candidate is a woman. And that's me.
That's you. Well, but you're on 3% tonight, at the bottom.
Well, as I say, I've only just launched my campaign. Come on, give me a minute.
Okay.
You know, no. What we need to be able to do is we need to be able to look at who the candidates are, put them through their mettle. I believe that I have the experience. I've been in Parliament 15 years. I come from the heart of the party. I've been a member for 40 years. I've done 7 frontbench jobs. I think I have the experience. I have the requisite skills, and I have the passion to lead our party to make sure that we win in 5 years' time. That's what people want,
yeah.
and that's what people need.
I mean, you're mentioning
Frankly,
your
our
experience.
country is crying out for an alternative to this terrible, terrible government.
You are the most experienced candidate in the field. Sir Keir Starmer's only got a few years of political experience by comparison, as has Rebecca Long-Bailey. They're the two front runners. I mean, do you think they are up to it in terms of experience?
I think that it's probably important for people to look at whether or not you have battle-hardened candidates. I am certainly battle-hardened, and that's an advantage that I have. You know, the bottom and top of it is that by putting yourself forward to become leader of the Labour Party when we're in opposition is frankly the worst job in the world. We know that the media, obviously yourself being an exception, but you know, but the media as a whole will be antagonistic towards a Labour leader. They will try and cut us off at the knees. I am the finished article. People know who I am. They know everything about me, and you know, I have no skeletons in my cupboard, and I have been put under pressure, and I've got through it.
Well,
you know,
I wonder if your
cookie.
loyalty to past leaders is a bit of a weakness, because you were loyal to Tony Blair, you were loyal to Gordon Brown, you were loyal to Ed Miliband, and you were loyal to Jeremy Corbyn. You can't have agreed with them all. So what do you really believe? Where do you stand in that spectrum?
Okay, so hang on a minute. Right, so I had been elected for 2 months when we had the terrible 7/7 attacks, and so 13 people from my constituency were killed. And Tony Blair's response to that was to try to introduce 90 days internment without trial. And I didn't believe in that. I was a proud new MP for the Labour Party. I didn't want to take on the Prime Minister, but I had to because he was wrong. And I was one of the leaders of that campaign, and we won. We stopped our country going down a path whereby we could arrest and hold someone for 3 months without any evidence. So, you know, I had differences with Tony Blair. I also had the difference with Gordon Brown in relation when he tried to introduce 40 days internment without any evidence. So when I have differed, I have made it clear. But when I am part of a collective, when I'm in a shadow cabinet, we have to have collective responsibility. I believe in that strongly. And so, yes, of course, I will do everything that I
those
can
are law and order
to make
issues.
the leader the best leader that he could be.
What about the economy? I mean, do you think that Labour was wrong on the economy at the last election? On things like nationalisation, tax, all of those sorts of issues?
I can't look at any particular item which is in the manifesto and say that was wrong. The problem that we had, frankly, was that there was too much in it. I had had the experience of going to Australia where I thought that I was going to meet the Labour government in Australia, but instead I met a Labour Party that was in mourning and shock, the way that we're in mourning and shock now. And they had made the same mistake, which was that they had too much in their manifesto, they confused the public, and it wasn't clear what our priorities were. So which would you have dropped? They'd done it in Australia, right?
Which bits would you have dropped?
So what I think we should have done was that we should have been clear about, you know, I don't want to go back to the 1990s apart from winning elections. And one of the ways in which we won elections was to be clear about what our priorities were. And the way that you do that is that you have discussions with the public, you learn from them, you find out what the big issues are of the time, and then you find a solution to it and you present it in that way. One of our problems was that we had 4 or 5 different announcements going on a day, and the public were completely confused, let alone our poor activists who were out on the doorstep in the wind and the rain and the dark trying to explain to the public what our policies were.
You've got to say what you got wrong. I mean, you can't just say we had too many things that were right.
Well, that's what I'm saying, actually. That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying
the public didn't think so, did they?
Is that our manifesto... What our manifesto had in it was, frankly, a 15-year programme, and it was too much. You know, what we needed to do was to say, this is what, it all comes back to this, right? We need to be a credible alternative government. We need, when we're talking to the public, to be able to say there is another way. It doesn't have to be like this. But in order for people to believe that there's another way, they have to believe in us. So we have to put forward a programme which is credible and believable and costed and has clear priorities. That's what we need to do. So looking forward, which is what we should be doing, we need to be looking forward to looking at what our priorities therefore ought to be. And that will depend on, obviously, on circumstances, on how bad Brexit is, what happens to our economy afterwards, you know, so that we need to be there to be taking the fight to the Tories,
under you as
making
leader,
sure that we have a clear relationship with Europe.
Under you as leader, let me ask you something specific. Under you as leader, is it conceivable that Labour could lead a campaign to rejoin the European Union?
No, I'm afraid not, because I think that we're leaving at the end of January, and the truth is, legally and constitutionally, we're going to be out. The important fight, though, is this. Half of our trade is with Europe. You know, many jobs depend, and our economy depends on having a close relationship with Europe. Boris Johnson says that he can get a trade deal done by the end of the year. Nobody believes him. And frankly, I don't think he cares. He has his majority now. He's won his election. You know, it was a mistake for us to agree to a general election on one simple issue and think that we could change the subject. We weren't able to. He wrapped himself up in a lie and said that he could leave. We will be technically leaving, but we won't have our continuing relationship with Europe sorted out. And what we can't allow to happen is that we end up with no deal at the end of this year, because that will be a disaster for our country.
Emily Thornberry, thank you very much indeed.